A federal judge appointed to the bench just 4 years ago has resigned, and now it's come to light that he allegedly engaged in unwanted sexual conduct and lied to the chief judge about it. We're breaking down Judge Joshua Kindred's fall from grace with Judge Matthew Sciarrino. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. So here's an interesting story for you. Judge Joshua Kindred suddenly resigned as U.S. District Court Judge for Alaska at the beginning of this month. The question, of course, becomes, why? Why would a federal judge just resign? Well, there is a scathing 30-page order from the Judicial Council of the Ninth Circuit that details very serious allegations against Kindred. The document reads, quote, Judge Kindred committed misconduct by creating a hostile work environment for his law clerks. That hostile work environment included unwanted, offensive, and abusive sexual conduct, including sexual harassment. Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan had recommended Kindred for the position of federal judge back in 2019. He introduced him to the Senate Judiciary Committee's hearing for Kindred's nomination. And what Senator Sullivan had to say in his introduction is arguably eerie, knowing the allegations against this judge now.
Like all states, Alaska has significant challenges with crime, particularly the heinous crimes of sexual violence against women. Josh's commitment to justice for victims of crime was so apparent to his supervisors that he was quickly promoted to the violent crimes supervisor while working in the Anchorage DA's office, and he has also been committed to pro bono work focused on combating sexual abuse and domestic violence, which is a very important issue and a passion of mine working on these issues, both as Alaska's Attorney General and as a senator.
Okay, so there's a lot to get into here. This is just a little bit of a tipping off point, but I want to dig into this more with a very special guest because I am joined right now by Judge Matthew Sciarrino, who recently retired from the Brooklyn Supreme Court in New York before retiring to Florida. Judge, thank you so much for coming on. How's retired life, by the way?
The 2 months have been pretty good so far, although it just really seems like a very, very long vacation.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're not the first person who said that I've spoken to about
Which in and of itself is weird for me because I never really took a lot of very long vacations.
Well, now it's well deserved. Now you get some time off.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to go through this, and as I said, there's a lot to get into. But 9 justices signed this document, which goes into detail about Kindred's alleged conduct with a woman who was first a law clerk, then an assistant United States attorney. And the document does note that this alleged victim did not appear in any case before Judge Kindred while she was employed as an assistant United States attorney. But having said that, according to the response to the complaint of judicial misconduct, the justices said they reviewed more than 1,000 pages of exhibits, which included more than 700 pages of text messages. And things got really rolling in December of 2022 when Chief Judge Mary Murguia got information about possible misconduct involving Judge Kindred. So the complaint stated that probable cause existed that Judge Kindred, A, created a hostile work environment for one or more judicial employees by subjecting them to regular discussions about his personal life, including conversations of a sexual nature, and ostracized a judicial employee who raised concerns about this behavior, and B, engaged in unwanted physical sexual conduct with a former judicial employee and engaged in unwanted verbal sexual conduct with that employee both during and after her clerkship. And then the third point is that he allegedly told individuals with knowledge of his potential misconduct to remain silent. Now, in a response, Judge Kindred denied all the allegations and said they were entirely without merit. But I am asking our judge, Judge Sciarrino, what do you make? What are your initial thoughts on that point?
My first reaction when I read the report was the end is really the strongest part, where they basically recommend that if he does not leave voluntarily, that impeachment proceedings basically were brought against him, which shows the weight of the evidence that they had. And I think, initially he denied these allegations, but just the mounting evidence was, especially the text messages. There were 200 pages of text messages between him and the female law clerk that then became a U.S. attorney. Between the two of them, which really are very clear that there was a relationship between the two of them. And I don't think he had any place to go at that point.
I'm going to get into those messages, but one of the reasons I'm so happy to talk to you is because when I interview police about officers who are accused of committing crimes, the one thing they say to me is what they hate the most is an officer behaving badly because it sullies the badge. When you see a case of a judge accused of serious misconduct, do you feel the same way? Because it's a privilege and an honor and a responsibility to be a judge, right?
And especially when it's a federal judge. A federal judge is a lifetime appointment. So, for example, my appointment was I received 3 of them, one for an initial year to fill up a vacancy, then another 10-year term, and then following that by a 10-year term. So there was always review of us in that process. A federal judge is appointed until he decides that he doesn't want to be a judge anymore. They can go on senior status. So the privilege of becoming a federal judge is like nothing else in the entire political landscape of the United States. There's no other lifetime appointment other than federal judges. So to go against that trust is something that is hard to understand. But at least the district court seemed to have some kind of ethics code, as opposed to our highest court, which is a whole nother issue, which probably needs some ethical oversight. As a state judge, we had an enormous amount of ethical oversight and a very active and proactive judicial conduct committee that looked into whenever there were any complaints against us of various degrees. And they took their job very, very seriously, and they're an independent agency. And we were watched, I think, a lot more than even the federal judges are.
Hey, I know this is a really difficult story, but we're able to bring you stories like this and analyze them for you because of the support we get from our sponsors. And I want to call out one right now, Noble Gold. So if you're worried about the future of the economy, this could be the company for you, because with so much uncertainty these days, it's natural to worry about the security of your retirement savings. But there is one asset that stands the test of time, and you guessed it, gold. For centuries, gold has been a hedge against market volatility and economic instability. But by rolling over your existing IRA or 401k into a self-directed gold IRA, you can enjoy the potential for long-term growth and stability. Diversify your portfolio with a tangible asset that has real value. And setting up your gold IRA has never been easier with Noble Gold Investment's streamlined process and expert guidance. And right now, Noble Gold will give you a 10-ounce silver American flag bar if you open a qualified account. So go to longcrimegold.com now. That's longcrimegold.com. Or call them at 877-646-5347. Mention Law and Crime. There's always a risk of investment and no guarantee of any kind. Let's break this down a little bit so we know what the allegations are. So we go back to February 2023. And the chief judge that I mentioned appointed a special committee to figure out what was going on with Judge Kindred. And that investigation took a while. The report was submitted in April of 2024. Kindred had a chance to present oral arguments before being questioned by the counsel. And according to the report, Judge Kindred appeared to have no filter as to the topics he would discuss with the clerks. He discussed his past dating life, his romantic preferences, his sex life, the law clerk's boyfriends and dating lives, his divorce, his interest in and communications with potential romantic or sexual partners, and his disparaging opinions of his colleagues. He also made disparaging comments about public and political figures. He also reportedly used very inappropriate language that we will not even repeat here. But it also goes on to state, quote, in the few instances where clerks came to Judge Kindred to discuss his inappropriate behavior, they were belittled or ostracized, and in one instance, a clerk left the clerkship. Now, the report points out that Judge Kindred had an unusually close relationship with one of his law clerks who was not identified. The two sent thousands and thousands of text messages to each other, far more than would be expected between a law clerk and a boss. And the document says some of these text messages were exchanged even while the clerk was out of the district for a week undergoing a medical procedure. During this time, Judge Kindred continued to send communications, such as telling the clerk that he missed her, and it feels like I haven't seen you in months, asking how things were going with the clerk's boyfriend, and stating that work is so much better when you are here. And then it goes on to state that in July of 2022, when Judge Kindred was traveling for a conference, he texted the law clerk incessantly saying, "I've missed you this week, which makes me worry about the emotion wreck I'm going to be when you leave." Now, Judge, there is always a risk, right, of being too personal with those you work with or those that you work for you in any kind of company. But here, a judge has a heightened standard of conduct, right? When you see those messages and that exchange, what stands out to you?
And the law clerk system in the federal court, unlike what I had in the state court, which was a personal law clerk that lasted for a very long time, the law clerks in the federal court kind of rotate in and out. And the recommendation of the judge, if they're looking to have a clerkship on an appellate court or go into the U.S. Attorney's Office, is incredibly strong as to whether they're going to get that next level job. So there's an immense amount of power over these young, just graduated law students to please their judge, which again puts them in a real heavy fiduciary position with regards to same. I think I had 7 law clerks over my 20 years as a judge. Almost all of them assigned to me, except for my last 2, which I appointed myself. And I also ran several intern programs. So I had hundreds and hundreds of interns that ran through my chambers and other judges' chambers. And you really have to be very diligent to make sure that no one is harassing these interns if they're watching a trial with another judge, if they're assigned out to another judge. And you have to make sure that they know that there's an open avenue of communication to you about anyone that might harass them. And likewise, if you're accused of being a harasser, there are signs all over the state courthouses what to do if you've been harassed, who you can go to, and it's a very proactive system. I'm not as sure what the federal courts are. They tend to be a little bit more standoffish in these kind of things. And I don't know if these law clerks necessarily know what they're supposed to do if they're harassed, because it's very tough to whistleblow against the person whose recommendation you really are going to need later on in life. And I think the federal courts really do need to look at creating a system where these law clerks know at least who to go to, whether it's the chief judge for that particular court or to other courts. But there needs to be an avenue that they know what they're going to do if something bad should happen like this.
And it's probably incredibly hard to make allegations and accusations against a sitting judge. But I will tell you, these allegations, as I was kind of talking about with the messages, they also feel wrong on a whole other level, because the law clerk says in October of 2022, around a week before she left for her new job as an AUSA for the District of Alaska, Judge Kindred asked her out for drinks. And afterward, the two were both reportedly intoxicated, and he invited her into his chambers at the courthouse. The document says, quote, "The law clerk reported that at some point Judge Kindred kissed her and grabbed her buttocks. She reported that she did not instigate the kiss. She indicated that it was brief, just like a smooch, and almost immediately afterwards, Judge Kindred dropped her home." Now, Judge Kindred's version of events, as told to the committee in his written responses and in his interview, differs very much so from the law clerk's. He stated that it was the law clerk who asked to meet for drinks, that she told him she was in love with him, that the law clerk said she wanted to come up to chambers, that she initiated 2 kisses in the chambers, that he never sat on a couch, and that she propositioned him on the way home. However, these denials were belied by documentary evidence, and as revealed later during Judge Kindred's testimony to the Judicial Council, by Judge Kindred's own admissions. So, Judge, there's something about this as well where, there's a he said, she said, but it all feels radically different when we were talking about this power dynamic as well. Again, what did you make of his defenses of this?
Even if you take his version of it as what happened, which I don't believe in the least, it's still not a situation that should have ever have happened, because he does have that power over, especially in a state like Alaska, which is kind of a small legal community. They don't have as many U.S. attorneys as some of the bigger states. They don't have as many judges as some of the other states. So it's very hard to continue to practice in that kind of area as a whistleblower. And granted, she didn't necessarily, whistleblow on this thing. It seems to have come out as part of the investigation, but even putting himself in such a space in that same time is something that judge was very wrong about doing. And like I said, I don't believe his version. I think it is probably even more than she is saying happened in that particular location.
So let's continue on, because about a week later, Judge Kindred was apparently moving out of his home. The law clerk threw him a pizza party, and she says that Kindred openly hit on her at the party, and she tried to avoid him whenever possible, but texted him that they needed to have a conversation in person. And when they met, the law clerk said that she and Kindred were talking in the truck outside of her house, but it was cold, so they went to his temporary apartment. And the law clerk reported that immediately after arriving at the apartment, Judge Kindred went to one of the bedrooms. And Judge Kindred kept shouting to the clerk to come to the bedroom, as he was lying on the bed, and asked the clerk to lie down with him. And initially, she sat on the corner of the bed, but at Judge Kindred's insistence, she lay down. The clerk then says he sexually assaulted her. Again, Kindred denied this to the committee, saying he had no physical or sexual interactions with the law clerk that night and didn't lie down on the bed at any point. But then in a text message several days after the alleged incident, Judge Kindred allegedly stated, "Didn't imagine your exit interview would involve that much oral, and got to see you from a pretty amazing perspective." Judge Kindred cannot provide an explanation for those text messages. However, he emphasized, "I can't reconcile them, but I'm telling you, all we did in that apartment that night was have a conversation. I don't remember the context of this, but I've not seen naked, so that doesn't make any sense to me. But again, I don't know." Judge, what do we make of this?
I really think it's hard to say that text message meant anything than clearly what it said, and again, it goes back to the fact that, as part of an exit interview, the law clerk here was in a position where she really wants to be on a most favored list of this judge. So she's just in such a horrible, horrible position. This is straight textbook sexual harassment, and not only a atmosphere that is horrible to work in. This was much more than that. I mean, this was really a forced sexual assault on someone that, I looked on my interns as almost my children. I was the Papa Smurf. You really had to, they're kids. I mean, they're just out of law school. They're much younger than you. They respect you. They want your approval. You really are in a fiduciary relationship over them, and to allow this kind of behavior to happen in the court system really makes the entire court system look horrible, federal and all the judges in the country.
Yeah, and look, we're not going to get into the entire document. It's pretty lengthy, but there were several other points that were made in the report that I want to address. For example, to the extent that Judge Kindred is alleged to have retaliated against individuals for disclosing misconduct, the committee found that his actions, though ill-advised, if they occurred, didn't rise to the level of misconduct. However, they say, quote, "Judge Kindred admitted that he lied to the special committee, and despite being presented with clear evidence that he had engaged in sexual acts, deliberately chose to mislead the committee." And then there's a footnote about the communication between Judge Kindred and the clerk. The justices note, "Again, there are many examples of these disturbing text messages which escalated in both frequency and degree over time. Examples range from Judge Kindred telling the law clerk, 'You're like an effing Disney princess,' to 'You're special,' to 'You looked amazing as always,' to 'Those effing blue pants you'd wear,' always killed me. Other messages are much more graphic. But here's the thing, and this is what I want to talk about next. This apparently wasn't the only time that Judge Kindred was accused of bad behavior, because another footnote states, quote, as further evidence of his bad judgment, the special committee's investigation revealed other instances of Judge Kindred failing to disclose potential conflicts of interest. For example, Judge Kindred received nude photographs from a separate, more senior AUSA with whom he had a flirtatious rapport. In addition, he and a different local attorney exchanged flirtatious text messages. He took no steps to report either of these inappropriate interactions and relationships that he had with these two attorneys, who often appeared before him. Now, Judge Sciarrino, it's being reported, and I want your take on this, that Alaska's Federal Public Defender's Office is calling out the U.S. Attorney General's office for not disclosing these conflict of interest, namely having these alleged relationships that they weren't disclosed with the prosecutors. In nearly 24 cases, they say that they're serious cases. There's drug trafficking, money laundering, assault, that the AG's office knew about these as early as November 2022. Now, the spokesperson for this office, the AG's office, Reagan Zimmerman, told a local media outlet, Alaska's news source, in a statement, this office has obligations to disclose and avoid potential conflicts of interest. We have and will continue to fully comply with all obligations and will supplement our disclosures as required. When the office learned of misconduct allegations, the United States Attorney reported the information to the appropriate disciplinary authorities responsible for investigating the veracity of these allegations. However, Public Defender Jamie McGrady said, quote, we are prepared to litigate fully any case in which our client was potentially prejudiced by the conflict of interest. And she also says that her office intends to ask for sentences and conditions to be vacated, for charges to be dismissed. So Judge Sciarrino, I want to ask you two questions here. One, talk to me about the duty of the Attorney General's office to disclose these relationships with the judge and their attorneys to the Public Defender's office. And B, could this result in the cases that Judge Kindred oversaw, that they could be overturned, the charges could be dismissed? So two-parter there.
As to the first part, I think the DOJ, if they did do what they said that they did, was turn over the information as they were receiving it to the disciplinary authorities, I think that's the appropriate step to take, because they don't necessarily know if these things are true until there's an investigation. As to whether or not that will result in a new trial, a new sentence, a vacating of a conviction, depending on the level of that relationship, it could very well result in a new trial for a particular defendant if it is established that relationship in some way affected the rulings of that judge. Ooh. And I think clearly, that an appellate court's going to look at the various trials and transcripts to determine if there was such a maybe a tilt to one side or the other. I mean, a judge might be tilting pro prosecution, pro defense, because that's his nature, sure, as opposed to any other relationship. But the fact that relationship does or did exist, and if the public defender was unaware of that, that's potentially a violation.
Isn't it just the appearance? Even if you don't even have to look at the transcript, if you see that the judge is having relations with the prosecutor in a case, that in and of itself could be enough. You don't have to, do you have to go through the transcript and see individual rulings or what was decided? I would say that the appearance of that in and of itself could be grounds for the vacating of the sentence or the charges being dismissed. No, I would think so.
I think clearly there's going to be an appearance of impropriety, and clearly it's going to be a mountain of review of the various cases. Courts as a whole don't like to do everything over again, and if they can figure out a way to save the conviction, the trial, clearly they're going to all be entitled to a post-judgment review. As to whether all of those reviews will result in every one of those cases being overturned, I doubt it somehow.
pretty incredible stuff. And I'll finish on this. So Kindred voluntarily resigned. The Federal Judicial Council referred the case to the Judicial Conference. It's going to consider recommending impeachment. And by the way, only a handful of U.S. judges have ever been impeached by the U.S. House and convicted by the Senate. So this is really something. And since Kindred already resigned, that may not really mean much, but it could prevent him from holding such a high office once again. And Judge Kindred has not made any public comments on the investigation or his resignation, so we will see what happens. All right, Judge Matthew Sciarrino, thank you so much for coming on. Great insight, really appreciate it. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.